seat over here, and your things are all up.
Oh, thank you. No, that's okay. I mean, you know, if these people, you know, stay in your class. Just to see you.
Okay, well, that's always
No,
up to
appreciate
the
it. That's okay. Well, maybe I'll come early. Thank you.
Nathan, Gabriel, Kyle, and Connor, and we may have another one coming. Okay, we are up and going. I believe let me share the screen. Now, what happens with this, haven't seen it before, is lucky. Are here and a YouTube, so you can go back. So this is the I've got to here. Well, work up on screen. This is the college prep English class for homeschoolers at Excellence in Education. Now we're starting. We've lost a couple of course terms we were doing, so let's see if we can catch it. The best way to do that is to take us into. All right, here's our agenda. Shows a little bit of what we have been doing previously. Well, whatever we just did. Oh well, at least we're still alive. I think maximizing the screen. I'm just not sure that this might work out. Well, and also if we maximize it, we may find that all to read in the. Anyway, to try this way, I think it's going to work fine. Normally, what happens is you would receive this agenda. And Nathan, I think you probably already received it. Yeah. I think you're on my list, but Gabriel, I don't think you're on the mailing list at present. So let's make sure that you do. And then once you get this, of course, you know everything that we're going to be covering in class. Well, not everything, because if something interesting comes up, we'll go that way too. But right up at the top here, the class event page and the YouTube page, this lets you know where this thing is going to reside eventually. And of course, also there's the playlist here, which consists of classes we've had this year. So you can always go in and check on those. If for some reason you can't make it to class, you can simply click remotely. If you've got that.
Find the agenda, it'll be in your, it's most likely to be in your spam folder, because I remember when I got the first agenda from this one, it went into my spam and I didn't get in, it was there, so just make sure to check that if you don't get it. Right, and if you create a whitelist on your computer, it's eclass at abacus-es.com will be the address that it'll be. Actually, I think this is coming from a different address, isn't it? I'm not sure which one this is. Okay. The one's coming from the new site, the dormschool.everlearning. That one usually tends to go into the spam. Okay. Well, see if you can whitelist the email address that is coming from, and that should solve the problem. Yeah, I did, and that's why it doesn't go in the. I apologize for this. The program we're using, which is called Moodle, which stands for Modular Object-Oriented Dynamic Learning Environment, has not successfully kept up very well with all of the new things, and it sort of glommed down. So I glommed up and slowed down, and so I created a new smaller class that seems to be running nicely, and so that's where we are. The larger class has thousands of resources that I'm just bringing over a bit at a time into the new one, including this time I added Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience, which you mentioned in your
and it just seemed like an ideal thing to add in. So we will add that to what we're working on here. Now let's look at the agenda a little bit. So let's look at submitted assignments, and I really enjoyed the assignments that you two handed in this week. And Dawson's got one up here too. We decided to look at the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Nathan, have you read Tolkien?
I haven't read them, but I've seen the movies.
Okay. Well, we're in good shape. Really needs to read Tolkien. I wouldn't say that audiobooks are a good way to do it, but the film necessarily fragmentary and specious, and you got the dictionaries handy. I think this is one thing I'd really like to do. Sure that we come here with and put it down. And if you don't, if you haven't pull up a dictionary, it'd be nice if at least one person had one of those handy. Okay, the full unabridged audio book, and I've also added in a link to the text you can find if you go here. They're not in the classroom, but they're out on the internet next to them. I just found the full text. It's in the Ukraine, I think is where it is. Okay, and I thought we might like to look at the things that I found always so fascinating. Who was really educated? He was Oxford Don, and loved and countryside. As we find is a plethora, if you'd like, even a nimiety of interesting words referring to the countryside. Nimiety. Everybody's got
Large
that one.
surplus.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Okay, so I give you to think about and look at. We have a number of them in English, and a lot of those have actually been drawn from Spanish, Arroyo, for example, things like that. But these are English sources, and sometimes a bit of Celtic and Irish sources for the glen and the dell. We don't talk about glens and dells in this country very much, but you'll find certainly that Tolkien will use those words. And also, what is a wold?
Isn't it a bush?
No. It's an unforested area, sort of a
plain.
It can be a plain. It could certainly be a planted plain, but it's an unforested one. See that wonderful poem, The Lady of Shalott. Is anybody familiar with that one? On either side the river lie long fields of barley and of rye that clothe the wold and meet the sky, and through the fields a road runs by to many towered Camelot. We should look at that one perhaps at some point. What wold's a wonderful word. And a spinney. Has anybody heard of a spinney? I know one place you probably have. And I hate to ask this, but has anybody here not read Winnie the Pooh?
I didn't read it.
Oh,
No.
good grief. I'm not sure I'm going to assign that in here necessarily, but really, after all, he does use the word spinney in the actual story in Winnie the Pooh. It's a small stand of trees. It's a spinney. A glade and a dingle. Where would you find a dingle in literature?
Isn't it a tangle of tree bushes or something?
It's a small, narrow, wooded valley.
Oh.
But it's also the name of a specific place in Tolkien's world, just to the east of the Shire. There's the dingle. Okay, so good afternoon, Dawson. Let's find a chair and pull it over and do some introductions. This is Dawson. To your left is Nathan, and to your right is Gabriel. We're looking at the class. Okay, so we're going to look at those perhaps a little bit further later on. Let's just go down further and look at what's going on, what else is going on in our current agenda. Much Ado About Nothing is a Shakespeare play. It's a delicious Shakespeare play and a very accessible one, I think. And there are many versions of it out online. I found a pretty good one. I believe you two managed to find the Branagh version and watch that. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Is that the one that takes place in Spain?
This is a good guess because the characters come from Spain. Certainly Don Pedro is from Aragon.
Yeah, it's the one with...
But it takes place actually in Messina, which is on the Isle of Sicily off Italy. However, in Branagh's version, he set it in northern Italy in Tuscany. And
I think I've seen Branagh's version.
Is it the one with it's got Keanu Reeves and Denzel Washington.
Of all those major actors, Keanu Reeves is the one you regard as...
I don't know the actor names.
It's the actor for Neo in The Matrix. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's a remarkable version, and I think it's one of my absolute favorites, but I wasn't able to find a free version out there, so we went for a free version just so I could put it up there. Now, this is in our classroom. And I'll show you where it is, and I'll tell you a little bit about this free version. Well, these are selections from that I thought we might like to look at. Okay, here are the updated assignments. Now, these assignments are advisory. I generally like to have more assignments than you can possibly get to, just to make sure. And if you need more, let me know. I'll find more. But let's just look at some of them. They're the higher priority assignments up at the top, and then I have lower priority assignments down below. And I like to have a mixture here of the things we're going to, we'd like to look at. Those things that have been suggested, requested, and in this case, of course, we're doing Tolkien. We're also going to be doing a little bit of Shakespeare, but also a whole section on language immersion. And I think the best way to learn language is to hear it being used well by people who know how. And in order to do that, I've found a collection of people who know how and whose work is available online, usually in YouTube form, and put together a section here on language immersion, to which I have recently added let's see here, the dingle of Daniel Trefusis. Have you folks had a chance to look at that?
No, I meant to.
Yeah, sorry.
But when I was, my internet cut out and I wasn't able to watch it.
Oh, that's too bad. That's a major problem. The internet cuts out. Life has to come to a screeching halt. Okay, this is a very, very odd little thing, but it's utterly delicious. It's written by Stephen Fry, who is an amazing philologist. He loves words and does wonderful things with them, but as I've mentioned before, his work tends to be laced with inappropriateness. And so this one I think we can get away with. He stays away from scatology to fairly well. In any case, what he's done here is create an imaginary Cambridge professor named this. And he has this imaginary professor having left him a number of things in his will, specifically a dongle. What's a dongle? Well, there are various different definitions for it, but a dongle is just, it turns out, is anything that will plug into a USB port. Really, that's the word for it. Now, it can be something that's simply designed to copy protect programs, but it can also simply be a thumb drive. And in this case, it is the thumb drive. And so the fact that Fry is representing, and very effectively, this Cambridge professor, he is writing up to that level, and listening to his language is very instructive and lots of fun, lots of fun. Other things I put up here, I believe you folks have all listened to this, Christopher Hitchens on Thomas Paine. Who's Thomas Paine?
So this the person who assisted with writing the Constitution. I'm trying to think.
No. Oh, it was that book, Common Sense, right?
Common Sense,
Yes.
which really was the foundation for the American Revolution, and was drawn on heavily for the Declaration of Independence, certainly, and influenced the Constitution, but a little less directly than the Declaration of Independence. In many ways, you could say he was responsible very largely for the success of the American Revolution. And one of his biographers is Christopher Hitchens, who himself is an absolute master of words. I have to unfortunately put that in past tense because he died a couple of years ago. But his work is thoroughly masterful, and he reads his own audiobooks, which I think anyone with that kind of a mastery of language should read his own audiobooks, because it makes all the difference in the world to hear the person whose words they are mouthing them and expressing them as they should be heard. And so I recommend that. Incidentally, Fry reads some of his as well, so worth following. Okay, and then the ongoing assignments. We're still working with Much Ado About Nothing. We've only looked at it a little bit for 1 week. And then we have the language immersion I put in here. Donald Fuchs, Christopher Hitchens, Jonathan Miller's Madness. I think we decided to shelve that, but you folks are welcome to look at it also. Let me just explain Jonathan Miller. He's a remarkable character. He started out as a doctor, as a neurologist, but then got on into working with the stage, and then ended up doing directing and producing. And I think the results of this, really the climax, was his documentaries, because he's done documentaries on subjects that he is an expert on. He writes them himself, he presents them himself, and his language is utterly flawless. And therefore, they're very they're wonderful study material. He's done several of them. Madness is just one that I came across recently. It's fairly heavy, though, and for that reason, if it doesn't appeal, ignore it, please. What did you folks think of it?
It was interesting. Like you said, it's kind of a very dark subject for a documentary, though.
It is indeed. But one that I'd like to suggest to your new folks, which is in our classroom, I think we did it at the beginning of the class, was a very short documentary he did called The Zoo in Winter. And let me just suggest that to you. The rest of the class has already seen it. But The Zoo in Winter, it's one of the funniest things you've seen, I think. It also shows off so much of his flexibility. Okay, and then here we go into the older assignments, and we'll see some of the things we've been doing here previously, which you're welcome to look at, but nothing's compulsory. Our object here is to find things that are inspiring and which everybody's going to enjoy doing. And if you find something that's onerous and distasteful and unpleasant, then skip it. Let's find something more interesting to do. Okay, let's go on to, well, I think, first of all, one of the things I'd like to suggest looking at here is the assignments forum for those new in the class here. here's the assignments form itself, and I believe I sent out to anyone who's been invited into the class. You should have received a link to this, and that this is a very short one because this is our new classroom that I just started this fall. But the previous one gives you the assignments that have been given over the last 3-4 years, if you're interested in looking back at those. All very interesting things that were largely inspired by what people in the class were interested in. So take a look at those if you like, and you'll see that generally I try to get an agenda out each week and an assignment sheet, and probably maybe another mailing of some sort as well, just to bring everyone up to date. Now, let's look at some of the assignments that have come in, and I apologize to you folks. For some reason, I did not see your posting of this. This was on January 1st, right? So that was a week ago, and I didn't see it then for some reason.
We were wondering that. We were saying, oh, Mr. Titchnell's probably didn't get some kind of notification.
Right.
Then when we checked again, we noticed that you did comment on them.
Well, I saw them today,
Yeah.
but I went through everything today to make
noticed.
sure I found it all. But what happened was I usually see a notification on the main page when something new has been posted, and somehow I missed that. And that disappears after you see it the first time, so I just missed it. Anyway, we have a couple of things I wanted to look at. Okay, this is the way things will be handed in this class. The easy way is to go into the writer's forum, which is where we just were here, I believe, right here, and add a new discussion topic and simply put your information in there. If you've written it in Word, just paste it in. Don't please use an attachment. Attachments are a pain to get to, but just put it straight into here. And then what I'll do is I'll look at it here, go through it, make a copy of it, mark it up, and make suggestions on it. When suggestions are needed, sometimes these, there's some really wonderful things being handed in here, and some of them don't require a great deal in the way of suggestions. This one's very nice. This falls into a particular category, and that is practice for the SAT essay, all right? And the problem with the SAT essay, do you know anything about the SAT essay?
I know that you have to write it in a specific amount of time.
That's
They give
exactly
you a
right.
topic and then they tell you you have a certain amount of time to write it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And that's the biggest problem, is the time limitation. And we've talked about it before. I don't want to go over that material too much again. But really what it comes down to is word count. That's really what makes the difference in the grading of the SAT essay. It has to be intelligent, at least at the beginning and the end, and broken up into paragraphs, preferably 5. But what you have in the middle is probably of no great significance. It's a question of how many words you can get down, how rapidly. And so that's something one has to practice on. So this one's a bit short, I think, simply because if we grade entirely by word count, it doesn't get that far. But on the other hand, I understand it's hard to come up with something better than that in 25 minutes with a pencil.
Yeah, it's a lot harder.
But we'll see what we can do to improve upon that. Also, you've got 4 paragraphs here, and I think that's one thing that one can see instantly. The distance is the number of paragraphs, and 5 is better than 4. 5 is the ideal number of paragraphs one wants in this one. Now, the premise here, the prompt was, should find as people who say what they think when we ourselves lack the courage to say it. It's a very interesting question, and I think you did a very nice response to it. And indeed here, not necessarily by vitiating the definition of hero as it applies to someone who gets out on the battlefield. but necessarily including in that definition of hero the person who speaks out against injustice. And you gave some excellent examples. These are just superb examples. It brings up the point, however, and this is something we discussed before, that real examples aren't necessarily going to buy you a lot more on the SAT essay than imaginary ones, just because we know that they don't do any fact checking. That has nothing to do with the grading process. And so those are very important on a good essay, college prep essay or college entrance essay. But on the SAT, they're probably unnecessary, and it's more important to get the word count down. But I really liked what you did here. And so in response, in fact, to your comments about Thoreau and his essay on civil disobedience, I suggested let's read it. And so I'll put that into our assignments for next week. Okay, good premise, examples, and conclusion. If it could be expanded to 5 paragraphs, would be better. What you have is good. You just need more of it. And I know it's hard. You spent the whole 25 minutes writing.
Literally, as I was putting in the final period, my timer beeped because I have this watch as a timer, so I set it for 25 minutes, and I just have to write as much as I can.
Absolutely, and you did fine, but looking at it, one has to say, okay, do one of these every week, and you're going to be much better at it in a few months. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it really takes some practice, and it improves with practice. So the more you can do there, the better. Let's just look at a few little things in here. For one thing, at the beginning and the end, you want to try to make sure, on the SAT essay anyway, you want to make sure that your language is sparkling, that it is effervescent, if you like, that it is coruscating, about your dictionary. And you want that really to be quite startling, because that's the part that the grader is going to read. And so up here at the beginning, where you say the word "a great amount of courage," I'm sorry, great amount is just rather placid and quotidian, if you'd like. It does not take you very far. Let's see if we can do something a little bit more with it. Unusual, remarkable, impressive, enviable. I mean, you could go off in all kinds of directions there, but a great amount is just, it's almost a meaningless pair of words, because it's just like verbs that don't do anything. The verb to do, the verb to go. Let's see if we can find verbs that actually have a semantic payload that will improve your communication. Okay, good premise. Here I had a little problem with Martin Luther King Jr. is a perfect example during times of racial segregation. Martin Luther King Jr. After all, we already know what we're talking about. Let's use pronoun just to avoid repetition. I realize writing it out gives you some more words, but that's the way it goes. This is nicely done. I see little to suggest here. The plural of something that has an S on the end of it is made by adding an apostrophe after the S. Yeah. Whereas what you did was made the United States into singular. Anyway, that works fine. As I said, there's little here to say anything about, and you did very nicely. I put an exclamation point here. That's not to say I'm suggesting you include an exclamation point. That means yes, that's good. And when one pictures heroism, an image of a superhero or firefighter is often envisioned. I like that sentence, but I have to warn you that one of the rules a lot of people have put forth for doing the SAT essay and essays in general is to avoid the passive voice. I don't agree with it. It's one of the reasons I think that I like this sentence. It works fine, but it is in the passive voice. Do you understand what's meant by the passive voice? It's
because I use the one. when one thinks.
No, one is a way of keeping something in active voice without necessarily specifying a subject. Passive voice is making the recipient of the action into the subject of the sentence. So in other words, instead of I hit the ball was hit. And that makes the ball the subject of the sentence, but the object of the action. And so here we have is often envisioned. And so what we've done here is eliminate the need for a subject that's envisioning it altogether. By using passive, we don't need to use a subject. And simply say, it is envisioned, the ball was hit. I don't need to know who hit it. And so I think in many cases, that's really the right answer, but a number of people have laid this blanket prohibition on the use of passive voice in essays. So it's controversial. Anyway, very nicely done, very nicely done. Okay, Connor, this is really great. This is wonderful stuff. And I don't usually give multiple projects for a single thing that's handed in, but well, this last semester we had entire chapters coming in, and they deserve perhaps more than one project credit. By the way, the project credit, let me just address that very quickly. I don't like the idea of grades. I prefer just to have a class in which our intent is to learn rather than to jump through hoops. But I've been pushed into having some sort of a grading system. And so the grading system is very simple. 12 acceptable projects for an A, 9 for B, 6 for C each semester. And so there are all kinds of ways you could put together a successful project. They can be a written project, they can be an oral presentation, lots of different sources. And as you can see, in some cases, you write something really substantial, it can get more than one credit. Okay. Now, you start out by talking here about Trelby. Would you like to tell us what Trelby is?
Yeah, sure. It was a program I ended up finding that allows you to write a screenplay very easily, because I remember looking into it, and they were saying, okay, well, when you want to write a screenplay, you have to have a specific format. And when reposting on here, the format got a little bit messed up, but generally you have to, for every single different kind of action or dialogue, you have to have a different margin. So I thought, well, that's going to be really hard to do in Word. You know, it's not really worth the effort. But then I found this program that does it for you already and puts in the proper format. So you just type in, press enter, and it's smart enough where it can pick off what you're doing and put it in the proper format.
Excellent.
I put up the link.
Is it free or?
Yeah, no, it's free. I just put up the link.
You did.
On there.
Thank you. Let's share that with everyone. This is one of the things that takes me off. I'm sorry, on another little tangent here, but there are so many little skills that are really very important to have, but they're not really very important for you to know anymore, in the sense that it's more important perhaps to understand a program that does things for you than to have in your head exactly what needs to be done. And one specific example of this is footnotes and making references in research papers. It's very important to get them right, but it's more important for you to have a way to cheat and get them in there quickly and easily than to know all of the rules involved in doing them yourself. And so in the big classroom, and I'll move it into the little classroom as well, I have a reference tool that will allow you just to put the ISBN number of a book in, and it will fill in the rest of it for you and provide what you put into the text and also the end note as well. And so learning how to use tools like that, it's really a whole lot better than having vast knowledge of how reference and resources are done. What you've done, however, is come up with something that works well for submitting screenplays. Wonderful idea. I love that idea. And I like the premise of your of your screenplay. Excellent. Okay, this is broken up into largely description and dialogue, right? And
Yeah.
and for the formatting there, we're going to assume that that formatting is correct.
Yeah, so I think the reason why the other one got a little bit messed up was this.
I
one was
didn't look
fixed-
at your
Yeah.
earlier one.
So that one was on the left, but the problem was when I posted it, I didn't realize you're supposed to align screenplays to the center. See, so this one I had to align on the left because it gets annoying to read when it went into the other one. It went all the way to the right of the screen, so you have to kind of scroll to find it, and then you can read it downwards from there. But then the formatting's still a little bit off, so it's better to read it this way, aligned on the left, which is
Right. Well, when I saw that one of them said fixed after it, I
Yeah.
didn't bother to look at the other one. So, anyway, this looks fine. It's not necessarily a great format for us to read up here because this old-fashioned Courier font is rather tiny, and it may not show up very well in the
Yeah.
video. We will see. But
yeah. I was just reading. I actually read up on that when I was on the Trelby website. They said why the Courier font. So
Yeah.
then that's what I was saying. Why can't you put in another font? They said that's the standard because they said there's not even a reason why it's the standard. It was when people started writing screenplays back on the old typewriters. Once they got into the word processors, they said, well, let's try to retain the look of a typewriter, and now that's the standard.
Yeah.
Which is
it's like so many other things. We're hampered, we're hamstrung by tradition. The same thing, of course, is true in music notation, which we have in the music class. Why do we write things the way we do? Well, because back in the 16th century,
Yeah.
this was how it developed, and it makes no sense at all. For that matter, why do instruments function the way they do now? Because they go back for centuries. We could easily build an instrument that had any interface you wanted and produced any sound you wanted. But would that ruin the way an orchestra works? I don't know. That's another question. Okay, let's just look at a few little comments I made in here. Not very much. This is nicely written. The only light source in the room emanates. Now, I know you've done it all in present tense, which I assume is appropriate for a
when screenplays you're supposed to write it in
yeah.
the present.
Emanates from the dim glow of multiple computer hologram screens. I felt that we've got an adjectival form of the word hologram. Let's use holographic computer screens, just a suggestion. Okay. The unknown man starts typing a command on the keyboard. I don't know if unknown man. I'm not an expert on screenplays, but I don't know if here we want some sort of other standard designation for.
You can just use that when there's when it's someone you don't see the face of, so you kind of just see that, or you can see him from behind, so you don't know who that person is yet.
I defer to your expertise on that. Okay, the man's eyes. We've got plural here, so we've got to have the verb plural. That man's eyes reveal. We can't have reveals. Okay. Okay. Now I'm assuming here, rather than read through the whole thing in class, which we probably won't have time to do generally, I'm assuming everybody will have an opportunity to go and read everybody else's material. This is one of the great advantages of doing it in this kind of a classroom, is we all learn from all of the mistakes everybody else is making, as well as the ones we're making ourselves. Okay, he hears a slam on the door. I wasn't even sure exactly what that meant. Does it mean somebody was trying to
slamming
knock
it
on
like
the
a
door,
knock,
or knock the door down, or slam the door?
They were banging the door really hard. So
Okay.
I just fixed. I haven't posted up fixing that, but yeah, I reworded it so it makes more sense.
Right. So I just suggested a knock, a strike. Here's the door slam. I wasn't sure what was going on there. Okay, springs into action. Not much to say here. It's nicely done. Well put together. Okay, the mechanic sound of an engine, mechanical clearly is superior there. Very nicely done. Very nicely done. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention here is that this is a category. This is a genre which is apparently very hot right now among publishers, and that is the anti-hero. And how long that will remain the case, I don't know. But just as futuristic dystopias are falling by the wayside now, this seems to be a genre that's coming in. So it may be something that would be very appropriate to send off to at least a representative, an agent, see if you can.
Yeah, that's
get
another weird
something
thing
up
about
there.
screenplays is you gotta write them. They said within 120 pages,
Uh-huh.
or I think so, or at least if you want to try to give it to somebody, a lot of people they said will just read it. If it's more than 120 pages, they don't want to read it.
Mhm.
Which is, I think it's because each page is supposed to be around like a minute.
You
so
have
around
clearly
2
done
hours.
more research on this than I. Would you like to cut and paste some of the insight into this genre?
Oh sure, yeah. I
if
found
you
this
were
one
up to-
website that I read up on.
Right. Let's put a link to that in the
Okay.
page in the classroom. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Dawson handed this in last year, so I don't remember it very well. Let's take a look and see what's going on here. Okay, this is a college essay. And notice that this is in a different category than the SAT essay. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about it before we dive in?
Well, it's a lot. It was just a question asking if there's anything that I would like to discuss or something
Mhm.
like that about my life. And so I just basically wrote down a whole bunch of things about my life.
I think you've laid out the fact that you've had a great deal of experience in a lot of different, very useful directions. Let's just take a quick look at it here. This does present an impressive array of achievements, but it's always difficult to speak of one's own accomplishments without sounding arrogant and boastful. Avoiding rhodomontade, if you like. Inclusion of quotes and endorsements from others might help. In other words,
Yeah.
take your teacher's comments and put them in there with quotes around.
All right.
Below are a number of suggestions for improving formality of your writing. Always use a spell checker. Be careful to say what you really mean, even when your reader will understand your intent. Now, here's an example, and this is a classic SAT blunder. To say, I also had an opportunity to help try to create a charter school, which would then be sent to the Board of Education. Now, everybody's going to know what you meant there, but what you said is wrong, because you are clearly not sending the charter school to the Board of Education. So we have to fix that. We have to fix it by saying, to try to create a charter school, the design for which would be sent on. Does that make sense? Because we want to make sure that we're not playing with apples and oranges. This is, in fact, one of the classic SAT blunders, as they say. I like the works of Austen more than Dickens. Well, we're comparing the works of Austen to the author Dickens. No, I like the works of Austen better than those of Dickens. And this is one that they specifically cite as being a major problem on the SAT. Okay, you're clearly, let's see, try to avoid repetition, try to avoid short, choppy sentences, try to use more meaningful words. Go, had, did are often replaceable with verbs that have more specific and appropriate semantic payload. We'll go over this in class. Okay, so let's just take a look and see what here's that example of the design for which. Okay, the word where is generally to be avoided as a demonstrative because it should really be used when you're talking about spatial representation, a particular place. When instead you're talking about a situation, a theoretical combination of events or something like that, it's better to avoid where and describe it differently. When, of course, again, should be specifically a time, whereas where is a place. But in this particular case, I thought the time was more appropriate than the place. So when I was placed in the assembly, and I thought actually helped improve the understanding of what was going on here, because you were in the California Assembly. Secretary, great. As a part of the assembly, I got to help pass bills. Now you understand why I changed that one, right? Because I mean that's okay. Everybody knows what you mean, but got to do something is not quite as formal. It's not quite as sophisticated. It's not quite as eloquent as had the opportunity, and so it works a little better that way. I have done much volunteer work. So much volunteer work that I lost track. Volunteer at Los Angeles Natural History Museum. Notice here, one of the problems is, especially when you're being autobiographical, you start everything with I. Yeah, it's understandable, it's hard to avoid, but we've got I. Now, well, you can get rid of one of those I's and also make your sentences more interesting by simply linking them together. So we've got at the Los Angeles Museum of History, and have also volunteered and still do volunteer at my local YMCA Christmas tree lot. Okay, youth in business is where people from youth in government. Okay, which it sounded to me much better if you could say youth in business in which participants of youth in government, or participants in youth in government, probably
Right.
in would be better there, get to run the YMCA Christmas tree lot. And the money made from the tree lot helps. Okay, but it sounds so much better to say with proceeds going to.
Yeah.
Do you see why?
Yeah, well, I have to go now.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
Okay, does this all make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great. Awesome. See you next week. Okay, the rest of you can go ahead and read this. You'll notice there are lots of little things that, something here that is sort of important to understand. He had the word horde of mosquitoes, and I changed that to a swarm of mosquitoes. What does one call that? Does anybody know?
A large mass of something.
Yes, that's that's his function, but it actually has a grammatical designation. Sorry,
No.
it's a collective noun. A collective noun, and there is a vast bulk of fascinating collective nouns in the English language, and you want to get the right ones. Unfortunately, everybody tends to focus on just a few of them, like a bunch of this. Well, it's a bunch of bananas, but it's not a bunch of crows. It's a murder of crows, and a bunch of squirrels. No, it's a dray of squirrels. Believe it or not, it's a parliament of owls and a murmuration of starlings. You've come across these before. Good. Okay, so anyway, when you're talking about mosquitoes, let's just make sure to find the right collective noun for mosquitoes. Okay, it was uphill both ways. This requires a little explanation. When you're talking about I had to go to school 5 o'clock in the morning and it was uphill both ways, you have to stop and ask, okay, how can it possibly be uphill both ways? requires a little bit of explanation before it would make any sense to anybody.
There's probably a different route that they had to take going back.
That could be the case, in which case explanation would solve the problem. This made me have a better idea. I think perhaps this gave me a better idea, or a solid understanding of the skill labor. So look at the comments here. I think you'll find that it's improved substantially by these little additions or suggestions. Went is about as generic a verb as you could possibly imagine. It's just the past tense of the verb to go. Let's try to find something a little more specific. In this case, visited, I suggested, but there might be others that would be more appropriate. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, here I have a think and rewrite this. Okay. For one of those days, I was one of the two leaders of the day. Okay, was is about as generic as you can get. That's a verb to be. I suggested and said served as, because it's more specific. It fits the context better. Okay, let's go off on to into other directions here before we do so. Okay. Back to our agenda. Okay, we have done this much of the agenda. Literature, Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, and also Tolkien. I leave it up to you. Which one would you like to jump into? How much Tolkien have you listened to or read?
I've read the prologue and the first chapter. So I'm right at the part where Gandalf leaves. So I just basically read the party a little bit afterwards.
I see. So you haven't even got into the shadow of the past.
No. Okay. For me, well, I actually started reading it about a month and a half ago before it was assigned, and I read that one up to Weathertop. So right when
okay.
I've read up to there. But I'm starting to reread it now, so that way I'm a little bit more, so I can be a lot more fresh on it, because I've forgotten a lot of it. So now I think I'm right after Shadow of the Past, or right near the ending of it, somewhere right there.
Okay. Yeah, the beginning is a little bit slow after all, too. He has all of these prologues and little asides at the beginning. Concerning hobbits, for example, and he even has a page or two on pipeweed. Okay, I think he was forced to put that in to try to make it generally acceptable and put aside any speculation that it might be something else that they were spoken. So he does say in there, it's some form of Nicotiana. Okay. Anyway, it takes a while to get into Tolkien because what one discovers very quickly when reading Tolkien is that this isn't just a book. This isn't just a story. This is one little picture of a much bigger world. And he's created this vast world. He created the world, in fact, before he created hobbits and before he created the Lord of the Rings. This is rather odd because he's a philologist, that is, a lover of words, and he studied a number of different languages and was an expert on earlier Anglo-Saxon literature and poetry, and he just loved working with that sort of thing. But he decided that he wanted to create a new language. So he started out by inventing a language. And then he decided he needed to invent a people who spoke that language and invented the elves. And of course, being an expert on language, he did it in such a way that it really mimicked the way languages really develop. He understood how these things, how languages morph, how they change. And of course, it didn't end up being just one language. It ended up being a number. We've got Quenya, we've got Noldorin and Sindarin, and we've got different alphabets used with them. Tengwar is the main one, and then we have the runic alphabets as well, and so forth. Yeah. So it all became very complex. And this great world developed into a story, and that story was called the Silmarillion. And the Silmarillion is sort of a weird story. It's much more like mythology than anything else. We talk about the gods and the elves and how they have their problems with each other in their battles and so forth.
Isn't it a bunch of mini stories almost?
In a way, it's separate stories, but it all weaves in together, and it all took place previously.
Yeah, I think it describes how the elves came to Middle Earth, right?
Right, how the elves came to Middle Earth, and Melkor was one of the gods that was created, and he became an outcast and became named Morgoth, and was this great evil god, one of whose subjects, one of whose secondary gods who followed him was named Sauron. Now he's the one who remains and is the adversary throughout the story that we read, because Morgoth has been cast out of the world before the story starts. Anyway, Tolkien was told clearly by every publisher who had any interest in it that this would never sell to anybody. And so he was asked, well, sit down and do something that's a little more accessible. And he sat down and wrote the words, and in a hole there lived a hobbit. Okay. Yep. And that was the beginning of a book called The Hobbit. Have you folks all seen the film?
I haven't seen the last one.
I have read it. No, I've seen the first two.
Yeah.
I haven't seen The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm very behind that area.
The read or seen the movies?
I haven't done them either.
Oh, you need to watch the movies, or at least the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings. Or you can read the book first. Either way.
Yeah.
I don't really want to impose this upon you necessarily, but I do think it's something that you would enjoy. I resisted significantly when it was thrust upon me from a number of different sources, and then found myself in the hospital, and somebody gave me a book. And I still associate the smell of the hospital with the beginning of the Fellowship of the Rings. It's absolutely magical storytelling. And so it's anyway, it's remarkable. And what's interesting, as I mentioned before, was one of my favorite literary critics whose lectures I will recommend and suggest to at one point or another, Terry Eagleton, admitted to never having read Tolkien. I thought that was such a horrible admission when you think about it. But anyway, so he wrote the Hobbit, which is often regarded as as a prologue to the trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. By all means, read The Hobbit if you feel like it. I think it's more of a children's book. One of the things one will find when looking through Tolkien is that it starts very, very simply as a children's book, and the language itself is very clear and simple and everyday, but it becomes more lofty, it becomes more sophisticated as you go through the books, and it doesn't necessarily become more difficult to understand, but it becomes a little bit more archaic. So instead of throwing a stick in the air, he will hurl it aloft. You understand what I mean? And so you'll find that this increases as you go through the book. And he was perfectly aware eventually of having done so and made no attempt to correct it or edit it in any way. So that's the way the books work. But they are, as I said, beautifully put together. And of course, they're delightfully written, but there's so much more in it than just what one sees. One of the things one finds, for example, is poetry coming through. And our major character, Bilbo, apparently is quite a poet. And he writes some wonderful poems in here. We've got this, the road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far away the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. Nicely constructed poem. It actually appears in this first book in 2 places, but he changes one word in it. Pursuing it with eager feet, and then later on pursuing it with weary feet. Has it got the same?
That was Frodo who said that, right? Wasn't it when he was walking with Frodo? Frodo was walking. He just started his journey, and then I think it was Sam who said it, or maybe it was Mary. He said, "Oh, is that your?" He said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, something Bilbo used to say, you know."
But somehow it sounds a little more depressing.
Yeah. Yes. It's a little weary and eager.
Exactly. So it's got these little asides, which I think enhance it immensely. So much that hits the screen nowadays, and for that matter, that hits the bookshelves, is just one adventure after another. These people never get a chance to sit down or go to the bathroom or anything. It's just one you watch a Bruce Willis film or something. You know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Whereas Tolkien, I thought this was one of the most delightful parts of it. One has a cyclic fervor followed by repose and reflection. And it goes back and forth between them. And we see this through the story itself. At the beginning, it's very nice and delightful with this party that's taking place. And then time passes, and we learn a little bit about the past. We actually spent a couple of chapters there just learning all of this stuff about the past. And then a black rider comes to town. For a long time, all we know about them is black riders. Eventually, we discover what they really are. It's really one of the creepiest descriptions you can possibly imagine. When the Frodo has decided to leave the Shire, as he has been told to do by Gandalf, the wizard, and is doing so, but he loves the Shire, so he decided, well, I'm gonna take a hike through the Shire on my way out, and takes a couple of friends with him, and we get this wonderful sort of sleeping under the forest trees, and then they find they're being pursued by some human. What is a hobbit, first of all?
A halfling.
A halfling. Very good.
Yeah,
exactly right.
Or I'm trying to think of the exact way he described a hobbit. I don't remember the exact way, but a person who's, I think they said, stands between, is it 3 to 4 feet or something?
I think
yeah, somewhere around there.
Averaging around 3 feet or so.
Yeah,
and
3 feet
a bit more.
Tall,
with the exception of 2 hobbits who are part of our story, who ended up growing unexpectly.
Is it
Bilbo
disproportionately.
and
Is it Mary?
No, they are Pippin and Merry.
Pippin and Mary, yeah.
Right.
Oh, I was gonna guess the old Took.
Oh yeah, that's
He's
right.
just the oldest, though.
They mentioned that in Hobbit. I
Right.
remember your great uncle. I don't remember the guy's name, but he said he grew so tall that he could ride an
Right,
actual
a real
horse.
horse, yes. Anyway, yes, indeed. But the Hobbit is described in the prologue, and so we'll get past some of this so we can get into something with some real action, so it doesn't bore you silly with it. But yes, hobbits are an old people. They are about half the height of humans, and that's, I'm assuming that's around 3 feet is appropriate there. And they never wear shoes because they have
Big feet.
hairy feet,
Yeah.
and very, very resilient and rugged feet. And when they were playing the film, these poor actors had to get into these rubber feet every day, even when their feet weren't going to be visible anywhere. They just had to make sure that they had them. They're not really magical, but magic does play a role in the story. In fact, they don't like magic very much. They're sort of homebodies. They're resistant to any kind of adventure. With
Or
a few
machinery
exceptions.
as well.
Yes, Bilbo being Bilbo.
Well, Bilbo being Bilbo, but Bilbo is also resistant up to a point. However, the Tookish side of him was the part that was adventurous, and that was the part that Gandalf appealed to when he was trying to
Yes, I'm
persuade
talking
him
to
go off.
the. You are also half Took. Then he goes, "Did you know your great grandfather was so large he could ride an actual
Ulroar Took, I believe.
Yeah.
Was his name. Yeah. Anyway, they love lore or specifically family trees, and they keep great track of. Well, this was stuff that appealed to Tolkien, so he just sort of put it in there. Anyway, that's what hobbits are. And hobbits tend to be somewhat long-lived, but they're not immortal. However, we do have immortal characters in this story. The elves are immortal. And there are a number of different flavors of elves. We've got the high elves and then the sylvan elves. What does the word sylvan mean, anybody?
Learned or learning, I think.
I'm sorry?
Does it mean learned?
No, it doesn't actually. It means having to do with trees and forests. Sylvan elves. In fact, I think if we look down at our agenda here, we will find the word sylvan right there. And it's an adjective. The last 2 words here are adjectives. Sylvan having to do with forests, and riparian having to do with, anybody?
Water.
Very good. Margins of water. In other words, the banks of a river would be riparian areas. And go through and look at these. I'm not necessarily going to expect you to take them all and look them up, but nowadays, that's so easy. I remember having been given that sort of thing back in the days of paper, and it was dreadful. But look, if I grab a coppice, for example, and I right-click on it, I can have my dictionary right up here and ready. And this set of lookup tools is programmable when you use a little plugin. I have that plugin linked in our site. Unfortunately, it only gives you, I think, 6, and I wish it gave you, 30 or something, so you could look things up. But anyway, you know what a hollow is, and a rill is a small run of water, as is a rivulet and a runnel, for that matter. A burn is actually Scottish for stream, and a vale is another kind of a valley, a small valley. A coppice is a stand of trees. A brake is a thicket of bushes. Again, we've got a thicket, or a grove is a grove of trees. A bosk. Now, these he just loved using this. I'm not sure he used all of these, but certainly we're going to come across those, and I think it's one of the most delightful parts of Tolkien. Okay, do you have any questions?
No.
Suggestions? My thought is, since our 2 new people haven't even looked at any of this yet, that let's define a distance that we want to have read into it and or listened. And again, I find that this is important. And it's really quite startling that it's the case, and I hope it remains the case. Let's pop it over here. this is, notice that the links are right in the agenda, so you can just follow those. And here on YouTube, someone has posted the entirety of the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings, as an audiobook. And it's very well read. The person reading it gets all of the dialects right. And this is important, a very fundamental part of Tolkien's understanding of language was based on the languages and dialects that he was familiar with. He was from the area of Birmingham. And I've added into our page, our classroom here, some other Tolkien resources. Let's see if they come up here. Tolkien resources from Angela. Angela was an online member of this class a few years ago, and she lived in Birmingham. And so she was in the countryside, which inspired so much of what Tolkien was writing about. And she knew where the two towers were and what they were inspired by, and various other things that took place there. So she put together this links. I don't know how many of these links still work, but I thought that might be something you'd like to look at if you want to examine things further in Tolkien's world. The full unabridged audiobook, as I said, is out here. Notice that there are two of them. That's because the book is broken up into books. In other words,
They each have 2 books. So
Yeah,
Fellowship of the
each-
Ring is 2. So the first book in the series has 2 books.
right.
So you could say that there's 6 books total.
You could. The last one isn't quite so much. Actually, the very end of the third book in the series, The Return of the King, is largely full of things like chronologies and the alphabets and family trees and various other things. Just all of this,
I think it's in
this
here.
ancillary material that explains everything that was going on. So a lot of the third book is devoted to other things as well. Not important. It's just an incredible story. And let's go into it. How far do you think we should be able to read by next
Oh,
week?
yeah, I see. It's right here.
I should be able to read.
Here we are. You can show the. This is the runic alphabet and the Tengwar alphabet, both of which could be used to represent the different languages, including the common speech, but also the Elvish, the original Elvish, of which nothing is extant, which apparently formed the basis for the later development of the Noldorin and Sindarin dialects, and which Tolkien referred to as Common Elvish, and later linguists have dubbed Proto-Eldarin. Okay, where does that come from? Well, it's proto means preceding,
Like prototype.
or indeed like Proto-Indo-European. You ever heard that word? Proto-Indo-European is also a non-extant language, but it's a language we know to have existed because, and we can even guess at some of the things that were in it because we can see its descendants and we can see the similarities between those. Practically all of the European languages stem from a single source. The only exceptions being Finnish and Hungarian and Estonian. And I think Basque, but the rest of them are all from a Proto-Indo-European source. And he did the same thing with Elvish that actually happened with development of languages, the Indo-European languages. So again, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting here. How far are we going to read?
I should be able to read a lot more because of the break. I didn't read as much. Also, I had my brother and I had a big math test to study for, so
Right.
I wasn't able to read as much as I normally would have been.
This before I forget it, there was something else I wanted to bring up. The character in your story is a great hacker.
Yes.
And I thought this was an interesting concept. I know you're both programmers. But there is a great hacker, there are a number of them out there now, but there's one who's actually also a very good speaker. The question is, should we put some of his material in into language immersion?
I'm sure I don't mind listening to it. So
he does a remarkably good job. His name is Jacob Applebaum. Have you ever heard of him?
no, I think I've heard of that last name.
Yeah, the last name does sound a little familiar. But I've
I
never
think that that's the guy they hired. They ran a contest where they basically said by Microsoft. It was run by Microsoft, and they said, "Okay, we're making a new operating system, and everyone will design a little security program, and then they release him into all the systems, and he will try to break into them. And whichever one he has the most difficulty with or can't break into wins the contest."
Oh, that's an interesting thing. I'm glad
Yeah,
that, well, I haven't very much good to say about Windows in general, Microsoft in general, but it's nice to know that they're trying to do that. Applebaum is actually a security expert. He's one of the founders of the Tor project, which you may have heard of, and he speaks on the subject of online security. If that's of interest to you, I'll add it in there. As I said, he does speak well, and I just came across an address he gave to a hacker convention in India, basically on the kinds of things that need to be written. Anyway, if that appeals, let's get back to the question again.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
I've read
you think
about
we can
2 hours and 45 minutes into it, or listened to 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, notice I recommend listening to this. It's the best way to go. This format means you sort of got to be on the computer. Do you folks know how to grab that and convert it to an MP3?
I have an iPod, but I'm not.
Well, the question is, would you like to be able to do that?
I prefer reading it. That's how.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm able to learn just as well that way.
Okay. Some people are visually oriented. I
I
understand
like
that.
reading too. Connor's more into the listening one than I am.
Oh, one of the reasons I recommend the listening one is just that the reader is so good and understands the pronunciation of all of these weird names and languages and so forth. So it's sort of nice to have that. But by all means, if you find reading is more comfortable, then that's just fine.
Oh, and on a side note, I was in a theology class last year, and the teacher mentioned something about Lord of the Rings also, and he said that on YouTube, there's this guy that does an audiobook. I don't know if it's for the entire book, but it's called Phil's Stuff of Doom. And we listened to like a half an hour of it, and the guy was a really good reader. He did all the sound effects and stuff like from his house. I don't know how, but it was really good.
What was he reading again?
It was Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh,
it was
really?
audiobook. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a suggestion. But.
Wonderful. If you think it's worthwhile, we'll add it in. It's been done a number of times. The one I prefer is the unabridged audiobook, which is what we've got up here. That it's also been dramatized with an entire cast of actors, in which, interestingly, the role of Frodo is played by Ian Holm, who ended up playing Bilbo in the movie. But it's got a real cast of very interesting actors. It's fairly faithful to the original, with some problems. But we'll discuss those as we go along. Okay, where are we going to get to? You have to leave, I realize.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I wrote my email, my mom's email here for you.
Okay,
And
if possible. Oh, you've got both of them in there, right?
Yes.
Good. Because I'd like to give you both.
Just for clarification, you send us the link that has all this information, right, on the email?
I'll send you a link to our online classrooms. And you'll be able to go in there and find everything.
Okay.
Okay, and you already have all of this, right? Okay,
And I'm
great.
getting all the emails.
Okay, so glad you could join us.
Thank you. I really
So how far are we going to read next week? Can we
Okay.
read up to Shortcut to Mushrooms? Does that sound
Okay,
okay?
yeah.
Can I see your book?
This one, sure. It's really big.
Yeah, where it's intimidating.
Is it all three of them?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all
this
three
one.
plus a bunch of extras.
I'm sure they've got it in the bookstore out here.
I'll just read as far as I.
Oh, this is our
Oh,
dad's
this is my,
old
Yeah.
I don't know where.
And if you find that it's a bit heavy going at the beginning where it's going into detail about just skip it. You can come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think I can do that.
Yeah,
Sounds
this
good.
one was
See you
my.
next week.
This one was
See you
my
again,
dad's. And it's kind of it's pretty old, but I guess not as old as he used to have a really old version, but this one used to be filled with tons of papers he put in there about like questions from a community. And it was very interesting to read all those ones, but
Uh-huh.
I think it was generally about the origin of this book, or no, the two towers. The question was like, what is the two towers referring to?
Uh-huh.
Like some people were saying, I remember it was
Sure,
the two
Dungle
towers. So yeah,
and,
it would have been those two, or it would have been I don't remember the name of the names of the towers anymore.
Well, there actually were two towers in the Birmingham area there. I can't remember what they were. I think one of them was a smokestack or something. It just sort of set the thing going. Excuse me. The first book that I had, which I believe was the first paperback edition, had a rather strange picture on the cover of a vine with big bulbous fruit on it and a couple of walking birds in the background. And I sort of associated that with Tolkien just because, that was what was on the cover. Then I later discovered that the artist had never read the book. And Tolkien, when first looking at it, said, "What is this? What are these bulbous things? Why emus?" Which was what he assumed. Anyway, that first edition was sort of, and of course it doesn't exist anymore. It was just read to death.
Yeah.
And replaced. But
Yeah, at my grandparents' house. The house is very old, and they like I said, my whole dad's side family, they all love Tolkien, so they have, I think because they had a big family, they have like 3 copies of each one, and they're very, very old. You can tell how old they are. The pages are all yellowed. And it was actually, I was reading from it. It's very interesting. All the artwork done for it was before. You can always tell it was before the movie. See, this one wasn't, because they take pictures from the movie, but the other ones you can see all the characters and how they pictured them before the movie came out.
Another point to make is that Tolkien did some of his own illustrations, but he was not an artist and really didn't do a wonderful job. A couple of artists, twins incidentally, named Tim and can't remember the other one, Hildebrandt, did illustrations from the Tolkien canon and put out calendars for several years. And these calendars had illustrations from Tolkien. And I thought they were absolutely wonderful. These two brothers would work on the picture together. One of them would sleep while the other one was working. They just switch back and forth. And the one we see up here is one of their illustrations, as a matter of fact.
Oh yeah, I see that. I think I've seen that one at my grandparents' house. Yeah.
There are some really superb illustrations. There's some of them are a bit lame too. I thought their Treebeard really didn't come up to things, and their Rivendell looked a little bit more like Cottage in the Woods or something. But and there have been wonderful ones of Rivendell. But what they did was they took pictures of friends of theirs who posed for them and so forth and used those. And you see they were consistent with the characters all the way through. But their Bilbo Rivendell is absolutely the most beautiful thing. It's this old hobbit sitting there at a desk with his quill and his pipe. Just that's in our classroom somewhere. Let me see if I can get this.
It's in the Tolkien resources.
I think it's in our class orientation page, but I'm not even sure of that.
Oh yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. There we
are.
are.
There's Bilbo. Anyway, the Hildebrands, I thought, did a wonderful job of a lot of it. And then they had a few of the things that didn't do particularly well. But a lot of other it has inspired many others, not just to illustrate, but also it's inspired a lot of music. It's inspired a number of song cycles, and some of that music is excellent. Some of it is a bit dreary, and some of it's rather silly. But we could look at some of those as well, because of course, with all those poems, there's a wonderful potential for setting those poems to music. The Prancing Pony, for example.
Yeah, I think in the movie, Howard Shore, the composer, he made music out of Bilbo's poem, "The Road Goes Ever On." That's one of the main theme of the Lord of the Rings is actually comes from that. If you're to listen, I think it's in the credits. They have when they play the song, then they have some little boy sing it, and then he's singing the lyrics of the poem. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So that's where it comes from. And then if you notice in the movie when Bilbo walks up, he says, I thought of an ending in my book. He walks up and he starts humming the tune. It's to the same way they did the music for the school.
There have been many others too, and some are utterly brilliant that have nothing to do with the story. There's one that's based on a poem that appears in The Hobbit when the dwarves come to Rivendell, and it's an absolutely delightful thing. And I will find it if you're interested. It's just terrific. I look forward to going through this material. It's just so much fun to do it again. Every time I read it, I get so inspired by it. Interesting point, it's very English in the sense that it's rooted in the language itself. And Tolkien's fascination was in the language itself. And it seems to need that language. I remember later on reading it together with my wife at the time in Swedish, and finding that even though I read through the same thing that I usually read, it just didn't have the inspiration. It didn't have the fire to it that it did in the English version. And I can't say whether that was my lack of understanding or simply the fact that it is so intrinsically English, it loses something in the translation. Anyway, shortcut to mushrooms looks like a good goal to set, I think. We can do that. Okay, I don't know where we stand as far as time. Oh, okay, it's not, we haven't run over yet, which we can still do. Let's go back to our agenda. There we go. Okay, now you folks have looked at Much Ado About Nothing, have you not?
Yes.
And also, we've concluded As You Like It, or do we want to look at that?
We conclude As You Like It, but I don't think we didn't get to conclude Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay. Did you all get a chance to watch the As You Like It that was posted?
I didn't watch the one that was posted, but I watched the other one that you recommended. The one that you said was the best version.
The As You Like It one?
Yes. Or no.
Oh, you're thinking of
Much Ado About Nothing?
Yeah. As You Like It, I did watch the posted version.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's the best one of all. But I wasn't able to post the best one of Much Ado because that was under copyright. Excellent. So you got a chance to watch both of those.
Yeah.
What did you think of them?
They were good. I liked the Much Ado About Nothing. It
Yeah,
really
that
was a
was
funny
really
play.
funny.
Yeah, I like them.
What was
Kenneth Branagh played it
Branagh.
great.
I love that
Great
scene
Benedict.
where they were trying to trick him.
Yes.
So thinking that was the best part. His facial expressions, like he's trying to lead in. Then he screams out and pretends he's a monkey. Yeah.
Or a bird or something.
They did a marvelous job of that, I think. And of course, Branagh was the director as well as Benedict. And one of the things that they did that I thought was so effective was how realistic is it to assume that a number of conspirators together ad-libbing dialogue for an unseen listener,
Mhm.
are actually going to be able to fool him with it. And then you realize that they actually did it well, because Leonato, the old man,
Yeah.
he
played the part
was
of
a
not
bit
knowing what to
fumbling
say.
at one point there. What do I say to this? And figures it out and manages to follow along with it. So he really made it realistic. That's one of the big problems with Shakespeare, is realism, because it's hard to swallow some of this stuff. It's hard to believe, for example, in As You Like It, that this duke would not recognize his own daughter just because she was dressed up as a boy. You know, that sort of thing. It stretches the your credulity a little bit.
Yeah.
But this one does really work, I think, the As You Like It, and it makes it really feasible that you might be able to do something like that and persuade people to fall in love with each other when indeed they've been living in this sort of rancorous aversion to each other for so long. We see it immediately, of course, when we jump in, that those two have a strong feeling for each other. But exactly what form it takes changes throughout. The Branagh version, of course, has some wonderful actors in it. Richard Briers plays Leonato, the governor of Messina. And Brian Blessed plays his brother Antonio. And I mean, those they've been on the stage for so long. Unfortunately, Richard Briers died recently. But there's such wealth of talent there. The two major characters, Branagh and Emma Thompson, in some of the scenes that they do together, are absolutely amazing. Of course, they were married to each other at the time they did this, but not later. Okay. Since you folks have all read all of those, and seen them, I would like to do some recitations or from scenes from it, if that would be possible. Can you bring in some that you would like to do? Some suggestions.
Next week or right now?
Well, I was thinking about have anything.
Because I was gonna say I don't have anything like
Okay.
this. Bring.
I can, sure.
So let's see if we can do a little bit with that. I mean, it's unfortunate that we still don't have any good female actors in the class, but we have to resort perhaps to the fact that Shakespeare didn't either. In his time, all of the roles were played by men, because that was just the way they did it. It wasn't appropriate for women to be on the stage. And it has been done that way. I think I told you about the version
The 12th Night.
of Twelfth Night. That was done recently. Several others have been done that way as well. Okay. Also, I wanted to mention the Much Ado About Nothing that I have posted in the classroom. And whose director I've been corresponding with. You were able to follow along on that?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm glad you're keeping up with that. He has offered to answer any questions that the class might have about the interpretation of it and so forth. He did apologize in a way for Benedict not losing his beard as he is expected to. However, his actor made that a sticking point. He would not go for shaving off his beard. So anyway, so if you have any questions there, by all means, we can go ahead and submit those. And I think they did a rather good job. What do you think? You saw the Branagh version first, but now you've seen that one, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I think I still like the Branagh version better. But
I only saw the first part of the version you posted.
I see. Okay. The Branagh version, after all, I mean, this is an incredibly lavish production with great actors throughout. And the little one that they did in the Bexhill Amateur Theatrical Society, they're doing out behind somebody's house, outdoors, hopefully in summer, because up the English Channel there, it gets cold at night. And he explained that that's why they had to cut it so short, was that
it would get very cold.
It gets chilly, and you could hear the seagulls in the background. But the sound was good on it, and I thought the acting was really very creditable. I thought it worked very nicely.
And fitting in World War II, it seems it could still fit if you were to think about it. Because, returning home from war, you could put it in there pretty well.
Right, you could.
You got the generals, it's just,
It's a little more difficult to justify saying how many men were killed in this action.
Yeah.
What is the answer to that? Do you remember what it was? But few of any sort and none of name. Is the answer. Think about that for a minute. Well, maybe somebody was killed, but nobody important.
Yeah.
No. And so, in other words, nobody, titled nobility were not involved. It reminds me very much of a line in Huckleberry Finn, which we haven't looked at here at all. But there's one little point in there where Huckleberry Finn is lying, as he always does, and is explaining what has just happened to him. That they had an incident on the steamship, or on the steamboat, and that they had an explosion. And so, was anybody hurt? No. Killed a nigger. What a horrible thought that is. But it's the same idea. Nobody was hurt. Somebody killed
some other, some other person.
And dangerous to use that
and
word
that's
in any
sad,
classroom.
because back then too, that's kind of how it was. If you were to go all the way back to where Much Ado About Nothing takes place, the only thing that, especially back then, when it came to the military strategy, it was pretty much the side that had more men wins, just because you have more men. So eventually all the other people are going to die before all your men die. So that's kind of how they looked at it. So when they asked if anyone died, nobody ever asked how many you died. It would make sense. They says, but no one important died, just the regular soldiers.
Just the normal people.
Just the cannon fodder, as they call it.
The pawns.
An interesting point. There's a poem by Thomas Hardy that you might enjoy. I'll bring that up at some point. But basically, talking about a soldier who dies far from home, but at least he had a name. That was the big point. He actually had a name, whereas most of them were buried nameless. It's a dreadful state the world has perhaps grown out of? That's a major question, isn't it?
Yeah, well, at least now we recognize, like, starting World War II, they put names in the gravestones. They would send, not starting since World War II, they would put graves in World War I. They would send their family a flag and say, at least now they recognize who died, instead of just saying, a bunch of people died, we don't know who, That's still.
If your husband doesn't come home, it's because he's probably dead. But we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. So at least now they check after a battle to see who lived, who died.
Yeah.
Yes, for a long time they didn't. Okay, suggestions for next time, just to make sure that we've covered all bases. We'll be reading up to anyway, shortcut mushrooms, and let's have some sections from Much Ado that we'd like to do. Perhaps something still from As You Like It, if you feel like throwing in a bit about the pancakes and the mustard, or the duel on the seventh cause, or something like that. But that's entirely up to you if anything like that appeals. And I will throw a few other random little things in that have come up since then. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. Okay. Any thoughts? Suggestions? Requests?
Not really.
Well, always open to new ideas, and so we'll bring things to a conclusion.
Oh, so you want me to put the resources for screenplay writing? want me to post that on the forum, on the writers forum?
Yeah, that's probably
Okay.
a good place to do it. Yeah,
Okay.
Then I'll move it over and put it into the classroom itself.
All right.
Okay, fine. We will see you folks next week, and we'll see you in the meantime online.
Okay.
And end the broadcast here.